Assalamu alaikum. So I heard that my mic turns off in 10 minutes. So I have 10 minutes, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. We have a beautiful dua in the Quran in which Ibrahim alayhi salam, it's an extended dua of Ibrahim alayhi salam. And in this dua, he says, وَلَا تُخْزِنِي يَوْمَ يُبْعَثُونَ. And do not disgrace me on the day when everyone is brought back. يَوْمَ لَا يَنْفَعُ مَالٌ وَلَا بَنُونَ إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ. Now I want us to pay attention here because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us on the tongue of Ibrahim and his beautiful dua, يَوْمَ لَا يَنْفَعُ مَالٌ وَلَا بَنُونَ. So he is asking Allah, do not disgrace me on the day when everyone is brought back. We're all going to be brought back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he says, do not disgrace me on that day, يَوْمَ لَا يَنْفَعُ مَالٌ وَلَا بَنُونَ. The day when nothing will benefit anyone of wealth or children. Now, if we look at the world we live in today, the things that matter most to us basically surround two things, which is wealth and some form of power. Now, at the time when the Quran was revealed, children were a show of power. And so here we see that absolutely none of these currencies will matter on the day when we are returned to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now here's where we have to pay attention. إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ. Except for the one who comes back to Allah with a sound, healthy heart. And so what I am asked to speak about today is just a snapshot of this concept of what does it mean to have a sound, healthy heart. Qalbun salim. First, I want to quickly give a definition of this word. So a qalb that is salim is a heart that you can think of that has no competitor with Allah inside of it. Everyone got that? No competitor with Allah at its core. Now, what are the things that are competitors with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in our world? Well, we know we had a talk about heedlessness, ghafla, that we can actually become so distracted by the things in our lives. And what do they distract us from? They distract us from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so what I want you to understand is that there are things in our lives that are gifts. There are blessings that Allah will give us. He will give us our spouse. He will give us our children. He will give us our money. He will give us our power and our influence. He will give us status. These are all can be blessings. These can all be gifts. But our blessings and our gifts can also become a source of very, very profound suffering. If we take those blessings and we take those gifts and they become competitors with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, everyone in this room is a believer. We are coming here as believers to the masjid. And so none of us would ever say, well, I love my child more than Allah. Or no one would ever say, I love my child as I love Allah. No one would say, I love my bank account as I love Allah. No one in this room would say, I love my spouse as I love Allah. None of us would ever take money and make an idol and bow to it. None of us would bow to our child. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warns us of something in the Quran. وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَتَّخِذُ مِنْ دُونِ اللَّهِ أَنْدَادًا يُحِبُّونَهُمْ كَحُبِّ اللَّهِ. And there are those who take rivals with Allah. Now we said that the definition of qalbun salim was a heart that does not have a rival with Allah at its core, right? We agreed. And here Allah is warning us that there are people who take rivals with Allah. They are not taking rivals with Allah because they're praying to these things. He doesn't say they are rivals to Allah because they bow to these things. He says, يُحِبُّونَهُمْ كَحُبِّ اللَّهِ. They love them as they should only love God. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is where I want us to start making it practical. Because no one in this room is ever going to make an idol to their child. You're never going to make an idol out of your money or your bank account. You're not going to pray to your status. But what we do is we love them as we should only love Allah. This is real. This is what Allah is warning us about. That every single thing that we have that is worth loving, every single blessing that we have, is going to also become a test. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warns us in the Quran. He says that our wealth and our children are a fitna. Why? Is wealth evil in and of itself? Are children evil in and of themselves? Why are they a fitna? And the answer is because we love them and therefore they are a test. And so when Allah is telling us that nothing is going to benefit us except for the one who comes to Allah with a sound, healthy heart, what Allah is telling us is that our entire life in this world, our entire time in this life, has to be focused on one effort, one goal. Are you guys all with me? Do you know what that effort is and what that goal is? To build a sound heart before we return to Allah. To build a heart that has no competitor with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now this is a lifelong journey. Now I want to just leave you with one reminder. And that is that the heart is something that if it is watered, it flourishes. If it is cleansed, it's purified. And if it is suffocated, it dies. And so I want to leave you with the most important oxygen of the heart, because I don't have a lot of time. The most important oxygen of the heart is the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I will leave you with that, inshallah. Dhikrullah, the remembrance of Allah, and in specific the salah. Now Allah has told us that the first thing we are asked about on the Day of Judgment is going to be our salah. And if that salah is in place and it is set right and it is well, then that person will be successful. And very simply put, if the salah is not right and is not in place, that person will have failed. And so I like to simplify it by saying that salah is the oxygen of our heart. And without salah, our heart becomes sick, oxygen deprived, just like the body does. If you deprive the body of oxygen, what happens first? Well, we suffocate, we try very desperately to get air, we become very weak, and then we die. Similarly, the heart does the same. When it is deprived of salah, when it is deprived of the remembrance of Allah, it starts to become weak, it becomes sick, it suffocates, and then eventually it dies. And so I want to remind you and myself that the way that we are going to keep this heart alive, that we're returning back to Allah with, and that's the only currency that's going to matter, is through the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I want to remind you of the words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who said, the difference between the living and the dead is what? He said, the difference between the one who remembers Allah and the one who does not remember Allah. I want you to think about this. The difference between the one who remembers Allah and the one who does not remember Allah is like the difference between the living and the dead. And so we cannot mess around when it comes to the remembrance of Allah and in specific salah. This is the difference between a believer and a disbeliever. This is literally what is giving oxygen to our spiritual heart. Finally, let me just leave you with something that I hope can be relatable to one of the biggest struggles we are dealing with in modern society and in this modern day. And that is the struggle of despair and depression and a next level amount of loneliness. And that is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in Surah Taha, وَمَنْ أَعْرَضَ عَنْ ذِكْرِي فَإِنَّ لَهُ مَعِيشَةٌ ضَنْكَ. Allah has warned us that whoever turns away from the remembrance of Allah, for that person will be a constricted, narrow, miserable life. If we turn away from the remembrance of Allah, our heart restricts. And when we turn to the remembrance of Allah, our heart expands. And when you have an expanded heart, you have the capacity to receive the light of Allah and to receive the light of guidance, and you have the capacity to withstand the hardships of this life. And so what we all want is an expansion of the heart, an expansion of the chest, which comes through the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I ask Allah to allow us all to return back to Him with a qalbun salim. Jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.